Commander Jiwoo Park stood at the bridge window, arms crossed behind her back, watching the alien ship grow larger on the view screen. Her jaw clenched so tight her teeth might crack. The Hexavian vessel glowed with strange blue energy as it pulled the human transport ship Hermes into its docking bay like a predator dragging prey back to its den. "They really did it," whispered Lieutenant Dae-sung beside her, his voice barely audible. "They actually took human prisoners." "They're new," Jiwoo replied, her voice steady despite the anger building inside her. "The Hexavians joined the Galactic Council only 3 years ago. Perhaps no one told them clearly enough." But that wasn't true. Every spacefaring race knew about humanity's one absolute rule. The rule that had kept an uneasy peace for nearly 80 years. Humans don't take prisoners, and humans are never to be taken prisoner. The memories of what happened during the Proxima Centauri conflict were burned into humanity's collective consciousness. The torture, the experiments, the broadcasts. After Earth's forces finally rescued the survivors, humanity made a promise to itself and announced it to the stars: never again. "Captain wants you in the war room," said Communications Officer Sunmi, her face pale as she approached. "The Hexavians just sent their demands over open channels. They're not even trying to hide what they've done." Jiwoo nodded and turned from the window. As tactical commander of the UES Vigilant, she would be central to whatever happened next. The Hexavians had made a terrible mistake, and soon they would learn why other species gave human ships such a wide berth. In the war room, Captain Hansol, Lee stood over the holographic display showing the Hermes captured in the Hexavian docking bay. 47 colonists bound for the agricultural settlement on Kepler 22b, teachers, farmers, doctors, and 13 children, all now hostages. "They're demanding we surrender mining rights to the Tau Ceti belt and 2 other systems," Captain Lee said without looking up. "They say they'll release the hostages when Earth signs the agreement." Jiwoo studied the Hexavian vessel design. It was impressive, nearly twice the size of their own ship, with technology that seemed more advanced in some respects. The Hexavians had emerged from their home system only decades ago, but had expanded rapidly, their technological progress exceeding their diplomatic wisdom. "Have they harmed any of the passengers?" Jiwoo asked. "Not yet. They're broadcasting videos of the hostages to prove they're alive." Lee finally looked up, his eyes meeting Jiwoo's. "They think this is a negotiation tactic." The room fell silent. Everyone present understood what would happen next. "They believe our reputation is exaggerated," said Defense Minister Yoon, joining the conversation through a secure channel from Earth. Her image flickered above the table. "Intelligence suggests the Hexavian leadership considers our no prisoners policy to be propaganda designed to scare less powerful species." Jiwoo couldn't help but feel a flicker of pity for the Hexavians. Their arrogance would cost them dearly. "How many ships do they have in the sector?" she asked. 3 battle cruisers and their mothership," replied the intelligence officer, bringing up the tactical display. "All positioned around Outpost 7, where they're holding the Hermes." Minister Yoon's expression was grim. "The Security Council has authorized a Class 1 response. The UES Retribution is being dispatched from Jupiter Station with a full battle group. You're to hold position and gather intelligence until they arrive in 18 hours. Class 1, the highest military response possible. No restraint, no limits. The kind of response that had made 6 different alien species surrender, rather than face human forces in the past." "Have other species been informed?" asked Captain Lee. "Yes," Minister Yoon nodded. "The Galactic Council has been notified of the situation. The Zolari Federation and 5 other major powers have already sent messages to the Hexavians advising immediate release of the hostages." "But the Hexavians aren't listening," Jiwoo stated flatly. "No. Their ambassador on Earth just delivered the same demands in person. They're displaying the hostages on screens behind him during the meeting." Minister Yoon's disgust was evident. "They believe this show of force proves their superiority." Jiwoo turned back to study the Hexavian ship designs. She needed to understand every weakness, every possible entry point. When the Retribution arrived, she would likely be part of the strike team. "We've intercepted communications from the Hexavian commander," the intelligence officer added. "He's boasting to his government about how easily Earth will surrender to protect its citizens. They've studied our democratic systems and believe we value individual lives too much to risk conflict. They studied the wrong part of our history, Ji-woo said quietly. Outside the window, stars glittered coldly in the void. Somewhere out there, the massive UES Retribution was already accelerating toward them, its weapon systems warming up, its strike teams preparing. The Hexavians had just made the worst mistake possible in this part of the galaxy. They'd taken humans prisoner, and soon they would learn why that single rule existed, not because humans were cruel, but because humans never, ever wanted another species to think that taking human captives was an option worth considering. The message reached Earth Central Command at 0300 hours. Within minutes, alarms blared throughout the military complex buried beneath the Rocky Mountains. Admiral Youngmi Kang was already awake when her comm unit lit up with the emergency code. She'd been expecting this call since the first reports. Of the Hermes capture. Begin the briefing, she ordered as she strode into the war room, still fastening her uniform jacket. The curved wall displayed the Hexavian ultimatum in bold text. Surrender mining rights to 3 star systems in exchange for the 47 human hostages aboard the Hermes. Below the demands ran live footage of the captives, men, women and children with fear in their eyes, surrounded by armed Hexavian guards. The Security Council vote was unanimous, said General Bo Young, sliding a tablet across the table. Class, 1 response authorized. Admiral Kang nodded grimly as she signed the order. A Class 1 response hadn't been issued in 15 years. There would be consequences across the galaxy, diplomatic fallout they'd spend years repairing. But there was no alternative, not when humans were being held against their will. The UES Retribution is ready for immediate launch, reported the Fleet Commander. Captain Tae-ho Kim and crew are standing by. On the display, the ship's specifications scrolled past. Humanity's most advanced dreadnought, recently retrofitted with technology that wasn't shared with the Galactic Council. The Retribution was built for one purpose, to ensure that no species ever felt safe taking human prisoners. Tell Captain Kim his orders are simple, Admiral Kang said. Retrieve our people. Make sure the Hexavians understand their mistake. She paused, then added, and make sure everyone else watching understands it too. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what those orders meant. 12 light minutes from Earth, docked at the lunar military station, Captain Tae-ho Kim received his orders. He stood before his assembled crew in the Retribution's vast launch bay. Over 300 men and women who understood exactly what was expected of them. The Hexavians have broken the one rule we ask all species to respect, Kim said, his voice carrying through the bay without need for amplification. They believe we will negotiate. They believe we will show weakness. He looked at the faces of his crew, determined, angry, resolved. We will show them something else entirely. A roar went up from the assembled crew. Not joy, there was no joy in what was to come, but fierce determination. Within the hour, the massive dreadnought broke away from the station, its engines flaring, bright enough to be seen from Earth's surface. Civilians pointed to the sky, understanding what that bright light meant. Someone had taken human prisoners. The Retribution was answering. As the ship accelerated past Mars, pushing to speeds that would have seemed impossible a decade ago, diplomatic channels across the galaxy hummed with activity. 6 major species, led by the ancient Zolari Federation, sent urgent messages to the Hexavian leadership. The Zolari ambassador's message was typical. Release the humans immediately. What you have done cannot be undone, but you can still limit the consequences. We urge you to reconsider your actions before the human warship arrives. But the Hexavians, confident in their technological superiority and vast territory, dismissed these warnings. Their diplomats sent polite replies thanking the other species for their concern, but assuring them that the situation was under control. The humans will negotiate, the Hexavian High Commander told his War Council. They value their individual citizens too highly. Our research indicates they will surrender the mining rights rather than risk harm to 47 lives. No one in the Council dared mention the rumors they'd heard about human military responses. They were a young spacefaring race, and the humans had seemed so reasonable in their diplomatic interactions. Surely the stories were exaggerated. 3 days into the Retribution's journey, the Hexavians escalated their strategy. They began broadcasting continuous footage of the hostages to every human outpost and colony. The message was clear. These lives are in our hands. Aboard the Retribution, Captain Kim watched these broadcasts with his senior staff. He studied the layout of the rooms where the hostages were held, noted the guard rotations, observed the Hexavian weapons and armor designs. "They're making this easy for us," said his tactical officer, Junseo. "They don't even realize they're giving us all the intelligence we need." "They think they're applying pressure," Kim replied. "They don't understand what pressure truly is." As the dreadnought entered the outer reaches of Hexavian territory, long-range scans detected a defense fleet assembling. 7 warships, impressive by most standards, but not compared to the Retribution. Still, Kim wasn't taking chances. He dispatched 3 stealth corvettes ahead of the main ship, small vessels with experimental cloaking technology that could slip past Hexavian sensors. "Strike teams Alpha through Delta. Prepare for briefing," Kim announced over the ship-wide comm. "Tactical officers report to the war room. We'll be within engagement range in 6 hours." Throughout the massive ship, men and women prepared for what was to come. Weapons were checked, armor tested, plans reviewed. There was no bloodlust, no excitement, just cold, professional determination. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about making sure that no species ever took human prisoners again. In the final hour before contact, Captain Kim sent one last message to Earth. It was brief, just 3 words. "Orders understood. Proceeding." The Retribution dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Hexavian territory, its massive hull gleaming against the backdrop of unfamiliar stars. To any watching eyes, it appeared to be alone, one ship, however impressive, against whatever forces the Hexavians might bring to bear. In truth, 3 stealth corvettes had arrived hours earlier, their experimental cloaking systems rendering them invisible to Hexavian scanners as they slipped into strategic positions around the sector's main military outpost. On the bridge of the Retribution, Captain Tae-ho Kim stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the tactical display as 7 red dots began moving toward their position. "Hexavian battle group detected," reported the sensor officer. 7 vessels. Formation suggests standard pincer approach. Their weapons are hot." Kim nodded, unsurprised. "Time until they're in weapons range?" 17 minutes at current velocity. Around him, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. There was no nervous chatter, no last-minute doubts. Every person aboard knew exactly why they were here and what was expected of them. "Open a channel," Kim ordered. "All frequencies, clear transmission." The communications officer nodded. "Channel open, sir." Captain Kim looked directly at the camera. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but carried unmistakable steel beneath. "Hexavian Command, this is Captain Tae-ho Kim of the UES Retribution. You are currently holding 47 human citizens against their will. Release them immediately and withdraw your forces. This is your only warning." The response came quickly, a holographic projection of a Hexavian officer, his scale-like, skin gleaming blue under the lights of his own bridge. The translator rendered his clicking speech into smooth standard. "Captain Kim, I am Admiral Vesht of the Hexavian Defense Force. We acknowledge your arrival and admire your courage in approaching our territory with a single vessel." The alien's mouth parts shifted in what humans had learned was their equivalent of a smile. "However, you must understand that we cannot simply release valuable assets based on threats. The prisoners will be returned when your government signs the mining rights agreement." Kim's expression didn't change. "They're not prisoners, Admiral. They're hostages, and humans don't negotiate when our people are held hostage." The Hexavian made a sound that the translator didn't catch, something like laughter. "Then it seems we are at an impasse. Your vessel, while impressive, cannot hope to prevail against 7 of our finest warships. Perhaps you should reconsider your position." "I've made my position clear," Kim replied. "Release the hostages. Withdraw your forces. You won't receive." Another warning. The Hexavian's eyes, 4 small black orbs set in a ring around his face, narrowed slightly. "You humans have a reputation for making grand threats. Perhaps it's time someone taught you the difference between threats and power. He leaned forward. Your ship will be disabled, and your crew taken to join the others. Then perhaps your government will understand the seriousness of our demands. The transmission ended abruptly. Kim looked at his tactical officer. Status of the corvettes? In position, sir. EMP systems charged and ready. Kim nodded once. Prepare main batteries. Target. The lead vessel only. I want the others to see what happens. Throughout the massive dreadnought, weapon systems that weren't listed in any galactic registry powered up. The Retribution wasn't built according to the standardized designs that most species shared with the Galactic Council. It was built with one purpose: to ensure that no species ever felt safe taking human prisoners again. Hexavian vessels entering weapons range in 30 seconds, reported the tactical officer. Hold fire until my command, Kim said. Let them make the first move. They didn't have to wait long. The lead Hexavian ship fired a warning shot, an energy pulse that dissipated harmlessly a kilometer from the Retribution's bow. They're hailing. Us again, said the communications officer. Ignore it, Kim replied. Signal the corvettes. Execute Plan Alpha. Across the bridge, officers touched controls, sending coded commands to the 3 hidden ships. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, without warning, 3 previously invisible corvettes materialized in the space around the Hexavian formation. Before the alien vessels could react, each corvette fired its primary weapon, not the conventional energy weapons the Hexavians might have expected, but something far more dangerous. EMP bursts away, reported the weapons officer. Direct hits on targets 2, 4, and 6. On the tactical display, 3 of the 7 Hexavian ships suddenly went dark, their systems completely shut down by the precisely targeted electromagnetic pulses. The remaining 4 ships broke formation in confusion, trying to target enemies that shouldn't have been there. Corvettes re-engaging cloaking systems, the tactical officer said. They've gone dark again. Kim nodded. Now the Retribution. Main batteries fire when ready. The human dreadnought's response was devastating. Concentrated beams of energy lanced out from multiple points along its hull, converging on the lead Hexavian vessel. The alien ship's shields held for precisely 3.7 seconds before collapsing. The beams cut through the hull like it was paper. Striking critical systems with surgical precision, the Hexavian flagship didn't explode. That would have been wasteful. Instead, it simply broke apart, major systems severed, atmosphere venting into space as emergency protocols sealed off undamaged sections. On the bridge of the Retribution, Kim watched without expression. Broadcast on all frequencies, he ordered. Show them we're serious. The communications officer hesitated for just a moment before complying. Channel open, sir. Hexavian vessels, Kim said, his voice level. Your flagship has been neutralized. 3 of your ships are disabled. This is not a negotiation. Release the human hostages and withdraw your forces. The remaining Hexavian ships continued to maneuver, searching frantically for the invisible corvettes. One fired blindly into empty space, hoping to hit something by luck. No response, sir, said the communications officer. Kim nodded as if he'd expected this. Very well. Corvettes. Execute plan. Beta. Target the weapons systems only on the 3 active vessels. Once again, the stealth ships decloaked just long enough to fire their secondary weapons, precision energy beams that sliced through the Hexavian ship's weapon emplacements with perfect accuracy. Sir, the sensor officer reported, we're detecting escape pods launching from 2 of the disabled vessels. Let them go, Kim said immediately. We're not here to prevent retreat. Signal the corvettes to clear a path for the escape pods. This was the other half of humanity's unspoken rule. They didn't take prisoners, but they didn't prevent escape either. The message had to be clear. Fight us and die, or retreat and live. There was no middle ground. As the escape pods fled toward the nearby Hexavian outpost, the remaining enemy ships finally stopped firing. A new transmission came through, this one from a different Hexavian officer. His scales pale with what humans had learned was their expression of fear. Human vessel, he said, voice trembling slightly even through the translator. We request. Terms for surrender. Captain Kim's expression remained unchanged. There are no terms. Release the hostages. Withdraw your forces, or we continue until none of your ships remain. The bridge of the last functioning Hexavian battlecruiser had fallen, silent except for the blaring of damage alarms. Admiral Vesht watched in stunned disbelief as the tactical display showed the destruction of his fleet. 4 ships completely destroyed, 3 disabled and drifting, all in less than 15 minutes. Impossible, he whispered, his scaled skin turning pale blue with shock. Their weapons, they're not like anything in the registry. His second-in-command approached cautiously. Admiral, the human vessel is hailing us again. Vesht stared at the display, at the massive human dreadnought that hung in space before them, seemingly untouched by the battle. Now he understood why. The Zolari Federation had sent such urgent warnings, why the Kelvin hierarchy had broken diplomatic protocol to contact them directly. They had tried to warn him about this, about what humans were capable of when their people were taken. Put them through, he said finally. Captain Kim's face appeared on the screen, his expression unchanged from their first conversation, as if the destruction of 4 warships meant nothing to him. Admiral Vesht, Kim said calmly, are you prepared to release the human hostages? Vesht felt something cold settle in his stomach. The humans hadn't even asked them to surrender, just to release the hostages, as if the battle, if it could even be called that, was merely a formality. We require assurances that... Kim cut him off. You're not in a position to require anything, Admiral. Release the hostages, or we continue. Vesht looked around at his bridge crew, saw the fear in their eyes. The humans had weapons that could shut down their ships with a single shot, weapons that could slice through their best shields like they weren't there, and those invisible smaller, ships that appeared and disappeared at will. Very well, he said finally. I'll give the order. But it was already too late. Commander Yunji Cho moved through the corridor of the Hexavian outpost like a ghost, her stealth suit bending light around her form. Behind her, 11 members of the Retribution's Strike Alpha team advanced in perfect formation, their movements synchronized from hundreds of hours of training together. They had boarded the station 5 minutes earlier, using breaching pods launched during the confusion of the space battle. The station's external sensors never detected them coming. Through her helmet's display, Yunji could see the station's layout, transmitted from the Retribution's intelligence section. The hostages were being held in what appeared to be a converted cargo bay on level 3. Between her team and their objective stood approximately 30 Hexavian guards. First checkpoint ahead, whispered Sergeant Minho through the comm. 3 guards, standard weapons. Yunji raised her hand, making a simple gesture. 3 members of her team broke formation, moving ahead with weapons ready. There was no hesitation, no warning given. The Hexavian guards didn't even have time to reach for their weapons before they fell. Clear, reported Lieutenant Sangmi. No alarms triggered. Yunji nodded and motioned the team forward. They moved with quiet efficiency, every step calculated, every action rehearsed. This wasn't their first extraction mission. They all understood what was at stake. 2 levels up, they encountered heavier resistance. A squad of Hexavian soldiers in full combat gear, obviously on high alert after receiving news of the battle outside. 8 targets, Yunji said quietly. Non-standard weapons, take them from multiple angles. Her team split into 3 groups, each approaching from a different corridor. The Hexavians had set up a defensive position, clearly expecting an attack from the main access shaft. They weren't prepared for enemies who already knew the station's layout, who could appear from any direction. The fight lasted exactly 27 seconds. When it was over, all 8 Hexavian soldiers were down and Strike Alpha continued without pause. We're getting chatter on their comm channels, reported the team's intelligence specialist. They know we're aboard now. Security is converging. On the hostage area. Yunji checked the time. They were still 3 minutes ahead of schedule. Understood. We proceed as planned. Weapons free, non-lethal, where possible. The human military code was clear. They didn't take prisoners, but neither did they kill without purpose. Anyone who surrendered would be left behind, unharmed. Anyone who fought would be neutralized as efficiently as possible. They encountered 2 more security checkpoints before reaching the corridor outside the cargo bay. Each time, the Hexavian defenders fought bravely, but found themselves outmatched by human combat techniques they'd never encountered before. Outside the cargo bay, Yunji held up her hand, stopping the team. Final approach, remember, hostage safety is priority 1. Inside, according to their intel, were 20 Hexavian guards and all 47 human hostages. The guards would be nervous, possibly desperate, the most dangerous moment of any extraction. Breach in 3, 2, 1, the doors blew inward, followed immediately by stun grenades that filled the room with blinding light and disorienting sound. Strike Alpha poured through the opening, moving with practiced precision to predefined positions. Yunji went straight for the center of the room, where the hostages were clustered together, surrounded by guards. Through the chaos, she saw a Hexavian officer raising a weapon toward the civilians. Her reaction was instantaneous. 3 shots, 1 to the arm holding the weapon, 1 to each leg. The Hexavian collapsed, weapon clattering to the floor unfired. Around her, her team systematically neutralized every armed Hexavian in the room. Some fought back and were killed. Others dropped their weapons and were zip-tied and left where they fell. Exactly 94 seconds after breaching the door, Commander Cho spoke into her comm. "Retribution, this is Strike Alpha. We have the package, all hostages secure, beginning extraction." Across the galaxy, intelligence networks hummed with activity as information about the human response spread. In the chambers of the Galactic Council, representatives gathered to watch the incoming reports. The Zolari representative, eldest among them, shook his head slowly. "They tried to warn the Hexavians, we all did." "Will we not intervene?" asked a newer member, representing a young spacefaring race. "The human response seems excessive." The Zolari's ancient eyes turned to the younger diplomat. "No, we will not intervene. What you are witnessing is not random violence. It is a rule being enforced, the one rule the humans insist all species respect." "But surely diplomacy—" "The humans tried diplomacy," interrupted the representative of the Kelvin hierarchy. "They asked once for their people to be released. When refused, they demonstrated why their rule exists." On the displays around the chamber, they watched as human shuttles departed from the Hexavian station, carrying the freed hostages back to the Retribution. Not a single human had been left behind. Not a single prisoner had been taken. "Remember this," said the Zolari representative quietly. "Humans don't take prisoners, and no one should ever take humans prisoner. It is the oldest peace treaty in the galaxy, written not on paper but in the memory of what happens when it is broken." 3 days after the battle, the Grand Hall of the Hexavian Central Government stood silent as High Commander Thrall approached the communication platform. Behind him, the remaining members of the Hexavian Leadership Council watched with downcast eyes. Before him, projected in the air, waited the human delegation led by Admiral Youngmi Kang. Thrall's scales had faded to a dull grey, the Hexavian expression of profound regret. When he spoke, his voice was stripped of the usual pride that characterized his species. "People of Earth, I come before you to formally apologize for our grievous error. The taking of your citizens was a violation of galactic principles and a fundamental misunderstanding of your species." He lowered his head in the Hexavian gesture of submission. "We offer full reparations for the suffering caused and withdraw all claims to the disputed mining systems." Admiral Kang's face remained impassive. "Your apology is noted, High Commander. The reparations will be accepted and distributed to the families affected by your actions. Consider this matter closed, provided no similar incidents occur in the future." The transmission ended, and Thrall turned to face his council. Already protests were erupting across Hexavian worlds. Citizens who had once celebrated their government's rapid expansion now questioned the wisdom that had brought such devastating consequences. The loss of 4 warships and hundreds of their finest warriors had sent shockwaves through their society. "How could we have misunderstood so badly?" asked Sub-Commander Vesh, one of the few military leaders to survive. "Our intelligence suggested the humans would negotiate rather than risk conflict." Thrall moved to the window overlooking the capital city. "We studied their politics, their public statements, their diplomatic protocols, but we failed to study their history." He gestured to a data tablet. "I've been reading their war records since the incident. Did you know that humans fought each other for thousands of years before reaching the stars? That their most sacred principles were often written in blood? Across the room, the Minister of Interspecies Relations spoke up. The Zolari representative contacted me this morning. They've offered to send advisors to help us better understand human cultural boundaries. She paused. They suggested we start by studying something called the Proxima Centauri incident. Several council members shuddered. They'd all heard rumors about what had prompted the human no prisoners policy. Now they would have to learn the full truth. On Earth, the Retribution's return was marked with a solemn ceremony. The rescued hostages reunited with their families, while government officials prepared statements for the galactic community. There were no celebrations of the victory, no parades for the returning soldiers. That wasn't humanity's way, not anymore. Indeed, the offices of the Diplomatic Corps, Minister Haewon Lee faced an unprecedented situation. Requests for meetings from 12 species that had previously maintained cold or even hostile relations with Earth. They're all saying essentially the same thing, her aide explained, organizing the diplomatic messages. They want to discuss trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, cultural exchanges, anything to improve relations with us. Minister Lee nodded slowly. The Hexavian incident reminded them why keeping peace with humans is important. Is that a good thing? That they're approaching us out of fear? Not fear, Lee corrected. Respect. There's a difference. She selected one of the messages from the Draven Collective, a species that had avoided all contact with humans for nearly 2 decades. Set up the meetings. It's time we built something positive from this situation. Commander Jiwoo Park stood at the observation window of Orbital Station 7, watching as the massive form of the Retribution slid into its docking berth. The great ship showed no signs of the battle it had fought, no scars, no damage, just the gleaming hull of humanity's most powerful defender returning home. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" said a voice beside her. Captain Tae-ho Kim had joined her at the window, still in his formal uniform from the debriefing. Jiwoo nodded. "I read your report. 17 minutes from first contact to the Hexavians surrendering." 16 minutes, 43 seconds. Kim corrected softly. "Still too long, people could have died in that time." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the maintenance crews swarm around the dreadnought, preparing it for its next mission. "The hostages?" Jiwoo asked finally. "All safe. Some minor injuries, psychological trauma of course, but they'll recover." Kim's expression remained neutral, but his eyes showed the weight he carried. Commander Cho's team performed perfectly. Not a single casualty on either side once they surrendered. Jiwoo studied his face. "You don't seem happy about the outcome." "Happy?" Kim considered the word. "No, not happy. Satisfied that we rescued our people, relieved that we didn't have to destroy their entire fleet." He turned to look at her directly. "But there's no joy in this kind of victory, Commander." She understood. None of them had joined the service hoping to destroy other species' ships or soldiers. They had all hoped humanity's reputation alone would be enough to prevent incidents like this. "Do you think they understand now? The Hexavians?" Kim nodded slowly. "They understand. And more importantly, everyone watching understands. That's the point, after all." On a nearby screen, news reports were showing peaceful scenes from across the galaxy. Trade routes reopening, diplomatic missions resuming, tensions easing between species that had been on the brink of conflict. The Hexavian incident had reminded everyone of the fragile balance that kept the peace. 12 species have requested new diplomatic talks, Jiwoo noted. "Even the Draven." Kim raised an eyebrow. "The Draven? That's unexpected." "Not really. They've been watching us for years, trying to decide if we're a threat." She gestured toward the Retribution. "Now they know the answer. We're only a threat to those who threaten us first." The captain smiled faintly. "A simple rule when you think about it." Jiwoo nodded. "The simplest. Don't take our people, and we won't take yours." She turned from the window. "I don't feel pride in what we had to do, but I feel something, knowing that because of this, fewer humans might die in the future." "Hope," Kim suggested. "That's what it is. Hope that someday we won't need ships like the Retribution at all. Together they watched as the final docking procedures completed, securing the massive warship in its berth. Around it, smaller vessels continued their normal routines: transport ships, civilian cruisers, scientific vessels. None of them carried brig facilities or prisoner cells. None of them needed to. That was the understanding that kept humanity safe in a dangerous galaxy. Human ships don't take prisoners, and neither should anyone else.